The galaxy trembled at the mention of them. The Predators, a race forged in the fires of countless battles, had long dominated star systems with ruthless efficiency. No species could stand in their way for long. Those who did were crushed, consumed by the unrelenting force of an enemy that knew no fear, no hesitation, and no mercy. Their warships, black as the void, moved silently across the stars, bringing death and destruction to any who dared oppose them. Planets fell in days, their inhabitants slaughtered or enslaved. The Predators didn't care for diplomacy or alliances. Power was all that mattered, and they had it in spades. Each conquest only fed their arrogance, and over time, they ceased to even see their foes as anything but weaklings waiting to be defeated. Fear was an alien concept to them. It was something they believed had been purged from their DNA millennia ago, during the harsh evolution of their species. Where other civilizations trembled before them, the Predators reveled in their own superiority. They saw themselves as the apex of the galaxy, the natural rulers of any and all who dared cross their path. No challenge had ever unsettled them. No enemy had made them reconsider their strength. In the eyes of the Predators, the galaxy was theirs to dominate. Every species they encountered reinforced their belief that no one could stand against them. Fearless in battle, their soldiers charged headlong into conflict, believing that hesitation was the true enemy. For centuries, this belief had held true. The galaxy's most powerful empires had crumbled beneath their feet. Resistance, when met, was swiftly crushed. Fear was a weapon that worked only on the weak, they reasoned, and since they had evolved beyond fear, no one could challenge their reign. That's when the whispers began. Across the outer edges of their territory, rumors of a new species started to surface. A race that, unlike the others, wasn't immediately cowed by the Predators' overwhelming presence. The reports were scattered at first, but consistent. This new race had a tenacity, a stubbornness that stood in stark contrast to the submissive behavior the Predators were used to seeing. At first, the leaders of the Predator Empire dismissed these rumors as nothing more than the wild fantasies of lesser races, hoping for some champion to rise against their inevitable domination. But the reports didn't stop. They spoke of a species known as humans. Unremarkable in appearance, technologically inferior to the Predators, and yet, something about them made the usual tactics of intimidation and overwhelming force less effective. The humans were small in number compared to the massive Predator fleets. Their worlds were not as resource-rich, nor their weapons as advanced. On paper, they should have been easily crushed, another footnote in the long history of Predator conquests. And yet, the humans did not flinch. They didn't run. They didn't beg for mercy. Instead, they stood their ground. The Predator leaders were intrigued. They had seen many species try to resist, but never with such tenacity. It was as if the humans lacked the very thing the Predators had long since deemed a universal truth: fear. But that couldn't be right. Fear was a biological response, a survival instinct. Every sentient being experienced it, except, of course, the Predators themselves. Still, the reports kept coming. Encounters with human ships had ended not in quick, decisive victories, but in strange, drawn-out battles. The humans didn't win these encounters outright, but they didn't lose them either. Instead, they fought with a cunning that confused and frustrated the Predator commanders. And then, for the first time in centuries, something unprecedented happened. A Predator ship, part of a larger fleet assigned to secure a human-controlled planet, didn't report back. No distress signal, no emergency beacon, nothing. It simply vanished. The fleet had been overwhelming in its firepower, more than enough to wipe out a small human colony. Yet there had been no battle, no victory. The ship was simply gone. The Predator leadership was still unconcerned. It was likely some malfunction or fluke, they reasoned. Humans were resourceful, perhaps, but nothing more than an annoyance. Still, they sent another fleet to investigate, confident they would soon stamp out this insignificant species once and for all. But deep within their minds, something stirred. A faint, almost imperceptible sensation. something they hadn't felt in so long they no longer had a word for it. The human explorers entered Predator space, their small fleet dwarfed by the vastness of the enemy's territory. They knew what they were up against, an empire of conquerors, feared by every other species they had encountered. But fear wasn't part of their mission briefing. Instead, they were there to observe, to gather information, and, if necessary, defend themselves. They weren't soldiers, but survival in deep space had taught them enough about combat to hold their own if it came to that. The Predators, when they first encountered the human ships, didn't see a threat. Their initial reaction was one of disdain, dismissing humanity's technology as primitive and outdated. The Predator commanders ordered an immediate attack, expecting the same swift victory they had become accustomed to. Human ships, after all, were nowhere near the size or firepower of the Predator fleet. But things didn't go as planned. The humans didn't fight the way the Predators expected. Their tactics were unconventional, unpredictable. They didn't engage head-on, instead choosing to outmaneuver their far larger foes. Using hit-and-run strategies, they avoided direct confrontation, picking apart Predator forces in small skirmishes. Every time the Predators thought they had the humans cornered, their prey would slip away, leaving destruction in their wake. The Predator commanders were frustrated. How could such an inferior species cause so much trouble? They had fought countless enemies, yet none had displayed this level of adaptability. The humans were like ghosts, appearing where they weren't expected, striking quickly, and then disappearing before the Predators could react. But it wasn't just their tactics that threw the Predators off. It was the complete lack of fear in their actions. The humans didn't flinch in the face of superior numbers or technology. They didn't hesitate when outgunned. They simply fought, relentlessly, as if they had no concept of what it meant to be afraid. At first, the Predators mocked them. How foolish, they thought, for a species to charge into certain death without any fear. But as the battles continued, something shifted. The humans weren't just surviving these encounters, they were winning. Every Predator ship lost was another blow to their pride, and the humans didn't celebrate these victories with bravado or arrogance. They simply moved on, preparing for the next engagement. The Predators began to realize they were dealing with something different. Humanity wasn't just another species to be conquered. They didn't react to intimidation. They didn't cower when faced with overwhelming odds. And most unsettling of all, they didn't seem to care about fear at all. The Predator warriors, trained to exploit fear in their enemies, found themselves increasingly confused by the human response. Their usual psychological tactics, meant to paralyze their foes with terror, had no effect. The humans kept coming, methodically, without pause, as if they were driven by something far stronger than survival instinct. Reports of human resilience spread quickly among the Predator ranks. Stories of their impossible victories, their refusal to surrender, and their strange, fearless behavior became the subject of hushed conversations. The high command remained skeptical, but the soldiers, the ones actually engaging with the humans, began to sense something was wrong. There was something about the humans, something they couldn't quite place. It wasn't their technology or their tactics that bothered the Predators. It was their complete disregard for fear. The warriors had been trained their entire lives to dominate through terror, to make their enemies submit before a single shot was fired. But the humans didn't play by those rules. They fought as if they had nothing to lose. The Predators dismissed it at first, attributing it to ignorance or desperation. But the more they encountered humanity, the more they began to doubt themselves. Each battle left them more unsettled than the last, and soon, they found themselves hesitating, something they had never done before. A creeping sense of unease began to spread among the Predators, though none would admit it. For the first time in their long history, they faced an enemy they couldn't understand. And for the first time, they began to wonder if they had underestimated the humans. The tide began to turn, and the Predators felt it. What started as minor annoyances turned into strategic disasters. Human forces, though smaller, began winning key skirmishes, exploiting every weakness in the Predator fleet. Their victories weren't overwhelming, but they were surgical. Each engagement left the predators more fractured, confused, and uncertain. The humans never attacked with brute force, they didn't have to. Instead, they relied on precision, deception, and patience. Predator ships were drawn into traps, lured into dead zones where human forces would strike and vanish before retaliation was possible. The humans used the environment, timing their attacks perfectly. To the predators, it felt as though they were being toyed with. What truly unnerved them, however, wasn't the human tactics. It was the way their presence lingered. Predator crews began to speak in hushed tones about the humans, how they never panicked, how they never hesitated. Some claimed the humans were ghosts, that they appeared out of nowhere, striking fearlessly from the shadows. The Predator commanders dismissed these rumors, attributing them to battlefield stress. But the facts were undeniable. Humans were consistently outmaneuvering them, and more Predator ships were being lost each day. What was worse, the confidence that had always defined their ranks was fading. For the first time, Predator warriors hesitated before going into battle. They double-checked their orders, questioning strategies they once executed without a second thought. Their minds, so used to dominance, struggled to understand what was happening. How could a species so technologically inferior, so physically unimpressive, cause such damage? The truth was harder to accept. The humans weren't afraid of them. The predators, who had long relied on fear to paralyze their enemies, were facing a species that refused to be intimidated. The humans didn't fight like others. They weren't desperate, reckless, or panicked. They were calm, methodical, almost unnervingly patient. This lack of fear began to spread through the predator ranks like a virus. Soldiers whispered about the strange feeling gnawing at them before battles. It wasn't something they had a word for, but they recognized it. It was the same feeling they had always seen in their enemies, the hesitation, the uncertainty, the creeping doubt. For the first time in generations, the predators began to feel fear. They tried to suppress it, to deny that such a thing could happen. After all, their entire species had evolved beyond fear. It was something they had eradicated from their biology, they told themselves. But no matter how much they tried to rationalize it, the feeling remained. The humans capitalized on this growing unease. Their tactics became more psychological. They would leave behind cryptic messages, mockingly simple warnings before an attack. They began to manipulate the predators' communication channels, disrupting their carefully ordered systems. Nothing overt, but just enough to sow confusion and make the predators question what they thought they knew. The first predator retreat was unthinkable. In a battle where the human forces were clearly outmatched, the predator commander gave the order to withdraw. His subordinates were stunned. They had never received such an order before. But the humans had played their hand perfectly, creating an illusion of overwhelming force, exploiting the commander's growing paranoia. It was a minor defeat, tactically speaking, but its impact on predator morale was catastrophic. Soldiers began to question their leadership. If their commanders were retreating, did that mean they were no longer invincible? Whispers of human resilience and impossible victory spread faster than the leadership could control. The Predator High Command still refused to acknowledge what was happening. They doubled down, insisting that fear was not in their nature, that their soldiers were merely fatigued from extended campaigns. But deep down, even they couldn't ignore the creeping doubt. They could sense it in the way their subordinates spoke, in the way their warriors looked at the humans, not with contempt, but with something new, caution. Something was happening to them, something they had never experienced before. And it terrified them. The Predator High Command convened in emergency session. The reports were undeniable now. Humans were systematically dismantling their forces, but it wasn't through overwhelming strength. It was through something subtler, something the predators couldn't fight with brute force or superior firepower. It was a battle of the mind, and the predators were losing. As they sat around their war table, the commanders exchanged uneasy glances. They had never faced an enemy like this. The human strategy was like a shadow, always out of reach, never fully revealing itself. Every move the predators made seemed to be anticipated, and every countermeasure they devised fell flat. The humans seemed to know them better than they knew themselves. There was a growing sense of helplessness in the room. The predators, so used to dictating the terms of every battle, now found themselves reacting, always one step behind. And it wasn't just the tactical losses that troubled them, it was the shift in their own forces. Their warriors, once unshakable, were beginning to falter. A seasoned commander, one who had fought countless campaigns, spoke up. His voice, normally firm, carried a hint of something unfamiliar. "It's not their strength that's breaking us," he said slowly. "It's their calm. They don't fear us. And now, we are beginning to fear them." The room fell silent. Fear was not a concept they were used to discussing, certainly not among themselves. The idea that they, the apex predators of the galaxy, could be affected by something so basic, so primitive, was unthinkable. But the truth was inescapable. Another commander, younger and more aggressive, slammed his fist on the table. "We are the predators," he snarled. "We have ruled these stars for millennia. Fear is beneath us." But even as he spoke, there was an edge of desperation in his voice. The others could see it. They had all felt it. Something had changed, and no amount of bravado could hide it. The humans, for their part, didn't press their advantage recklessly. They knew they had the predators on the back foot, but instead of going in for the kill, they continued their patient, methodical approach. They chipped away at the predator fleets, never engaging in a direct confrontation unless absolutely necessary. Each victory was small but cumulative, adding to the growing sense of unease within the predator empire. Meanwhile, on the ground, predator soldiers found themselves dealing with a new kind of warfare. Human ground forces, though fewer in number, were just as elusive and unsettling as their ships. They moved with precision, striking key points and then disappearing into the terrain. The predators were used to facing enemies that either surrendered or fought desperately. But the humans didn't do either. They simply executed their missions and withdrew, leaving no trace except the damage they had inflicted. Predator warriors, long conditioned to believe in their own superiority, began to question everything. The psychological strain was immense. They had never been taught how to deal with uncertainty, with an enemy that didn't play by the rules they had always known. The more they tried to understand the humans, the more confused they became. What made it worse was that the humans never displayed the usual signs of aggression or desperation. They didn't boast or taunt. They didn't issue threats or demands. They simply acted, with a cold, calculated efficiency that unnerved the predators more than any show of force ever could. The first full-scale desertions from predator ranks began to occur. Small at first, just a few soldiers unable to handle the psychological pressure, but it was a crack in the armor. The idea that a predator could abandon their post, could give in to fear, was unthinkable just a few cycles ago. Now, it was becoming a reality. The High Command was forced to acknowledge the truth: they were losing not just a war of weapons, but a war of the mind. The humans were changing the battlefield, and the predators, despite all their strength and experience, had no idea how to fight it. A decision had to be made. Some called for a massive show of force, a final, all-out assault to crush the humans once and for all. But even as the suggestion was made, doubts lingered. Would it work? Could they face the humans directly now, knowing how deeply the seeds of fear had taken root? Others suggested retreating, pulling back to fortify their core worlds and regroup. But that option carried its own risks. To retreat was to admit weakness, something the predators had never done. Could they survive the blow to their pride, their identity? As the debate raged, one thing became clear: the humans had done something no other species had ever achieved. They had forced the predators to confront the one thing they thought they had left behind, the one thing they believed could never touch them again. Fear. The predator empire was at a crossroads. Their greatest strength, their belief in their own invincibility, was now their greatest weakness. The humans had exposed the fragile foundation upon which their dominance had been built. The sense of superiority that had carried them through centuries of conquest was eroding, replaced by a creeping, inescapable dread. The High Command's debates dragged on. Every decision seemed fraught with uncertainty. The notion that they could lose, that they could be vulnerable, was impossible to ignore any longer. They had encountered resistance before, but it had always been temporary. This was different. The humans had introduced something new into the equation, something the predators hadn't been prepared for. The final decision came down to the most senior members of the predator leadership. The debate had gone in circles for days, but it was clear now, they could no longer pretend this was a simple tactical problem. The humans had done what no other species had done, they had made the predators afraid, and that fear was spreading faster than any battle report. In a last-ditch effort to regain control, the predators launched a massive assault on what they believed to be the heart of human territory. It was a gamble, a desperate move meant to reassert their dominance and break the psychological grip the humans had over them. The entire fleet was mobilized, the largest force the predators had ever assembled for a single offensive. The message was clear, this would be the battle that would end the humans once and for all. But the humans didn't meet them head-on. As the predator fleet moved deeper into human space, they found nothing. No ships, no defenses, no signs of resistance. It was as if the humans had vanished. Confusion swept through the ranks. Had the humans retreated? Had they abandoned their worlds? The commanders, already on edge, began to argue amongst themselves, unsure of what to do next. Then, the attacks began. Small at first, isolated strikes on the edges of the fleet. But they were precise, devastating key systems and leaving the massive predator warships crippled. The humans used their familiar tactics, appearing out of nowhere, striking with deadly accuracy, and then disappearing before the predators could mount a defense. It was as if they were everywhere and nowhere at once. Panic set in. The predator fleet, which had always operated as a single, unified force, began to fracture. Commanders issued contradictory orders. Some wanted to press forward, convinced the humans were baiting them into retreat. Others demanded a withdrawal, realizing that they were being picked apart, piece by piece. In the chaos, something fundamental shifted. The humans weren't just winning the battle, they were breaking the very spirit of the predator empire. For the first time, the predators were no longer the hunters. They were the prey, and they knew it. As the human attacks intensified, entire predator ships began to fall back, fleeing from engagements they would have once charged into without hesitation. The fleet, so confident just days earlier, was in full retreat. The humans had dismantled not just their ships, but their psyche. In the aftermath of the failed assault, the predator empire was in disarray. Their once unquestioned authority was shattered. No longer were they the apex predators of the galaxy. The humans had proven that even the most fearsome of empires could be brought to its knees, not by overwhelming force, but by something far more powerful, fear itself. And the humans? They didn't celebrate, didn't boast of their victory. They simply returned to their worlds, having done what they needed to do. The galaxy had been changed forever. The predators, once feared by all, now carried the weight of fear themselves. Fear of an enemy they could never fully understand, fear of a species that refused to play by the rules of war, and fear of the unknown that awaited them in the future. The humans had not just defeated the predators, they had redefined what it meant to fight. In the vastness of the galaxy, where empires rose and fell, humanity had proven that true strength wasn't just in weapons or numbers, but in the ability to face the impossible without flinching. And the predators would never forget it.